Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Helen Miller from Ohio EPA. We will be starting our presentation in approximately 1 minute as we still have some folks logging on. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Remediation and Reuse of Brownfields in Your Community webinar. This is part of our In Your Community webinar series, which focuses on environmental issues at the local level, covering a wide range of topics from how Ohio EPA regulates pollution sources to ways on improving the environment in your local area. My name's Helen Miller with the Division of Environmental and Financial Assistance here at Ohio EPA, and I will be moderating this afternoon's presentation with Ohio EPA's Richard Murray and Shelby Powell from our Division of Environmental Response and Revitalization. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items to help you participate and engage with our presenters. On this slide, you see an example screenshot of your attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your computer desktop on the right-hand side of your screen. For this presentation, you're listening in using your computer audio. If you're having sound issues or if the slides stop advancing, please try refreshing your browser. If that doesn't work, please try logging off and logging back in. Please feel free to submit questions to the presenters by clicking on the question mark icon and typing them into the questions pane on your attendee interface. You may send your questions in at any time during the presentation. We'll try our best to answer questions as they come in and during the Q&A portion. If we don't answer your question during the Q&A portion, we will reach out to you via email following today's webinar. You can also click on the document icon to view included handouts. The handout today includes a PDF file of the PowerPoint slides used for today's presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive an email after the webinar with a link to the recording, a link to the survey, and a link to your certificate of attendance. The survey will also pop up once the webinar ends. We value your feedback and would greatly appreciate it if you let us know how we're doing and let us know if there's anything we can do to further assist you. This webinar is approved for 1 hour of registered environmental health specialist and environmental health specialist in training credit. To receive credit for attending, please provide your REHS or EHSIT number in the post-webinar survey so Ohio EPA can submit on your behalf to the Ohio Department of Health. This webinar is also approved for 1 hour of VAP Certified Professional Development credit units. To receive credit, submit your webinar attendance certificate with your CP renewal application to Ohio EPA's VAP Certified Professional Program. And with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Richard.
She meant Shelby Powell, but that's okay. Good afternoon. Again, my name is Shelby Powell with Ohio Brownfields and Voluntary Action Program at the Ohio EPA. Today we'll be discussing the remediation and reuse of brownfields in your communities. Let's kick things off with a poll question. What are some examples of potential brownfields in your community? You can select all that apply. Your options include an abandoned gas station, a shopping mall, a single-family home, a church or a school, and or a dry cleaner.
Okay, and I am launching the poll, so when it pops up on your screen, please make your selections. Okay, and it looks like most people have voted. If you have not made your selection, please do so at this time, and I'll be closing the poll shortly. Okay, I'm closing the poll and sharing the results. There you are, Shelby.
Thanks, Helen. It looks like you guys are on the right track. All of these are examples of brownfields except for a single family home. Abandoned gas stations are very common brownfields. Shopping malls can be and may also have asbestos containing materials, especially if it's a dated structure. Again, single family homes are not considered brownfields. Churches and schools have the same issues as shopping malls, and that they may have asbestos containing materials or an underground storage tank. A dry cleaner is a common brownfield also. It is important to note that on-site operations can lead to possible contamination due to the use of certain hazardous chemicals in dry cleaning operations. Thanks, Helen. As we went over some examples, now let's define a brownfield. A brownfield is an underutilized or abandoned property that is contaminated or believed to be contaminated from its former use. Typically in Ohio, these are commercial properties or residential properties with 4 or more units, such as apartment buildings. Some of the contaminants found on brownfields can include asbestos or lead-based paint, and abatements can be costly and hinder the redevelopment of a building. Here are some examples of typical brownfields. I won't read through the entire list, but maybe you have seen some of these items around your community without realizing they were actually brownfields. During this session, we'll give an overview of the regulations that apply to brownfields, as well as any liabilities and protections. We will also touch on land use restrictions and brownfield funding options in Ohio. Let's start with how investigations and cleanups came to be. CERCLA, which stands for the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, also commonly known as Superfund, is the primary law that contaminated sites fall under, as it covers the release of hazardous substances both pre and post 1980. The Small Business Liability Relief and Brownfields Revitalization Act of 2002 amended CERCLA to address potential liability protections and to promote the remediation of brownfields. The BUILD Act of 2018, or the Brownfields Utilization, Investment, and Local Development Act, further amended CERCLA to clarify those liability protections. The Act states that government entities that acquire property through the various means listed here are exempt from the definition of owner or operator if that government entity did not cause or contribute to the release or threaten release. Ohio passed similar liability protection in 2020 that is virtually identical to the federal law. Other environmental statutes that may apply to contaminated properties include RCRA, which stands for the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, covers post-1980 releases from sites that generated, stored, treated, transported, or disposed of hazardous waste. BUSTER, or the Bureau of Underground Storage Tank Regulations, includes facilities such as gas stations. TSCA, which stands for the Toxic Substances Control Act, is under US EPA and covers but is not limited to PCB cleanups. The Voluntary Action Program is Ohio's voluntary cleanup program, where a property owner or volunteer can clean up a site and receive a release of liability from the state of Ohio in the form of a covenant not to sue, or CNS, which is a promise that no more cleanup is needed. Here are some liabilities you may run into for your property. Under CERCLA, if the owner or operator of a contaminated property is a potentially responsible party or a PRP, they could be held liable for the contamination and all cleanup costs for any release of hazardous substances at the property. PRPs would also be held responsible for any response activities via cleanup and for reimbursing the state of Ohio for any costs incurred relating to the site. This also includes owners and operators that were not responsible for the activity that caused the release, but either impeded a cleanup or did not conduct the proper due diligence, such as a phase 1, prior to purchasing the property after 2002. Lastly, working with land banks to hold the property can be a valuable tool for communities, given that they may be exempt from this liability under certain circumstances. However, it's important to remember that whoever obtains the property from the land bank doesn't hold the same exemptions and needs to perform their own due diligence for liability protection. Given all of this, how can you protect yourself or your community from liability when dealing with a contaminated property? Fortunately, you have a few options under CERCLA. The bona fide prospective purchaser defense, or BFPP, protects against enforcement actions taken by the state or federal government. The BFPP defense is self-implementing and does not require regulatory sign-off, meaning that the landowner does not need the Ohio EPA or a court to grant the protections provided under the statute. However, it only covers CERCLA liability. To receive liability protection, a BFPP must perform all appropriate inquiries, or AAI, prior to acquiring the property and demonstrate no affiliation with a liable party or parties. With this 2002 provision of CERCLA, environmental due diligence needs to be conducted prior to the property transaction to meet the requirements of the AAI rule that I previously mentioned. To evaluate a property's environmental condition for AAI, a phase 1 environmental site assessment, which is the due diligence, would need to be completed. Through a phase 1 assessment, you'll be able to determine what reasonable steps must be taken in order to stop any continuing release, prevent any threatened future release, or prevent or limit human, environmental, or natural resource exposure to a previously released hazardous substance. Not taking reasonable steps, not maintaining compliance with a land use restriction, or impeding with an institutional control or response action can make an owner a PRP even when they were otherwise exempt. An example would be dispersing knowingly contaminated soil during excavation and grading, and as a result, failing to prevent the release of a hazardous substance. This activity could cause you to lose your liability protection. If you determine that you are not exempt or are a PRP, you can still address your liability and those responsibilities with the VAP. As I mentioned earlier, you can conduct a voluntary cleanup under the VAP and receive liability protection from the state, and if you choose, from the federal government. This issuance of a CNS from the Ohio EPA, through issuance of a CNS through the Ohio EPA. A voluntary cleanup under the VAP does not need to be completed prior to acquiring a property. A CNS can also cover federal liability in some instances for RCRA, CERCLA, and for Buster Class C releases where there is no responsible party. In addition to a BFPP defense or a VAP cleanup, you may need to complete other obligations outside of those programs, such as completing a Buster No Further Action or a RCRA closure if those obligations apply. By doing this, you can layer your liability protections. As I touched on previously, a Phase 1 environmental site assessment is the due diligence or historical review of a property to determine if there were any recognized environmental conditions called RECs, or in the VAP, they are considered identified areas that need to be further investigated. An environmental professional must sign off on a run-of-the-mill Phase 1, and if you have a property undergoing cleanup through the VAP, a VAP certified professional must sign off on a VAP Phase 1 that would be required. A VAP Phase 1 must be conducted or updated within 180 days prior to the date of acquisition of a property to qualify for the BFPP, similar to a VAP NFA submittal. A Phase 1 generally runs from approximately $2,500 to $6,000. Following a Phase 1, if there are areas of potential contamination identified, a Phase 2 investigation will need to be performed, which may include soil sampling, installation of monitoring wells, or vapor sampling to figure out how much contamination there is and at what levels. I will note that all RECs or AAs are to be investigated during a Phase 2. The Phase 2 includes an evaluation of any contamination that's present and is used to determine if remediation or land use controls may be necessary. Costs associated with conducting a Phase 2 will vary based on the complexity of the site and contamination that may be involved. Several options exist if it is determined that remediation is needed, the most common being land use controls. You may also need engineering controls, such as barriers in the form of soil cover, parking lots, or building slabs. In other cases, it may be necessary to implement a more active remedy, such as soil removal or a vapor mitigation system, which often resembles that of a radon mitigation system commonly seen in houses. There are many options, and working with a good environmental professional or certified professional will help assist you in selecting a cost-effective solution and remedy. Land use restrictions, also known as land use controls, institutional controls, or activity and use limitations, are legally formalized using an environmental covenant, or an EC. An EC may be entered into through regulatory programs like VAP and BUSTER, and often include both land use controls, such as commercial or industrial land use, as well as restrictions on activities such as implementing a no-dig area. Common restrictions found in an EC may include no groundwater extraction, no basements, or building occupancy limitations, which prohibit occupancy of new buildings without agency approval. All ECs entered into with Ohio EPA also require annual reporting for the site so that the agency can confirm compliance with the applicable land use restrictions. In addition to annual reporting, Ohio EPA is statutorily required to inspect each property that relies on use restrictions at least once every 5 years. Currently, the Ohio EPA conducts these inspections once every 3 years. Thanks, everyone. And from here, we will go to Richard, who will discuss the common brownfield funding sources in Ohio.
Thanks, Shelby. As she mentioned, my name is Richard Murray, and I am a Brownfield and VAP coordinator with Ohio EPA. I will provide a broad overview of the common brownfield funding sources available in Ohio. Investing in revitalizing Ohio's brownfields is important. It can repurpose the underutilized or blighted properties dispersed throughout our communities. The cost to evaluate and clean up brownfields often hinders new investment, but various incentives that are available to you can help level the playing field to make these properties competitive. Next slide. We're going to kick off this portion of the presentation with a poll question. How familiar are you with the various grant funding options for brownfield assessments and cleanups in Ohio? Not familiar at all, somewhat familiar, very familiar. I have used grant sources before.
Okay, and I'm launching the poll, so as that pops up on your screen, go ahead and make your selection. Okay, and it looks like most people have made their selection. If you have not, please make your selection soon, as I will close the poll shortly. Okay, and I am sharing the results. Back to you, Richard.
Well, based on the votes, it seems as if it's somewhat evenly spread to not familiar at all and somewhat familiar. Well, this is a great starting point, and I'm excited to share our free services and potential funding for your projects. Shelby previously described the laws and various tasks for conducting a brownfield cleanup. Oftentimes, funding can be leveraged to assist with the 4 primary tasks of brownfield redevelopment: planning, assessment, cleanup, and finally, the reuse of a property. Planning at the community level is important because it helps to provide a local strategy to tackle brownfield projects. Plus, this is important information for grant applications. Assessments provide a dual purpose. They define areas of potential contamination, and as Shelby discussed earlier, they can provide liability protections for property transactions. Cleanup, which can be expensive, readies the site for its next use. Businesses and developers will often invest in brownfields based on economic and market needs. There are 4 types of funding typically available for brownfields. I'll go over many options that include free services, grants, and loans. Our Targeted Brownfield Assessment Program, commonly referred to as TBA, aims to promote the redevelopment of brownfield sites by providing free environmental assessment services to your community. The services offered through our TBA program are here to assist you in transforming the brownfield properties in your area into economic and community assets. Again, these services are at no cost for eligible properties. You can apply for TBA funding throughout the year because it's on a rolling basis. Our program offers phase 1, phase 2 site assessments, geophysical surveys, asbestos and lead surveys, and a large array of planning activities. You can find a copy of the TBA application on our website, but please feel free to contact us. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions. Now that we have a broad idea of what the TBA program is, let's talk about who's eligible. An eligible applicant must be a governmental or nonprofit entity. The property is not eligible if it is subject to CERCLA or on the national priorities list. Commercial and industrial properties are eligible, as are some residential properties if they are more than 4 units in size. If you have a property that you're unsure of, again, please contact us. We'll be more than happy to discuss the details with you. As an applicant, you do not need to own the property. All you need is a signed access agreement from the property owner, which we include in our online application. This grants legal access to the applicant, the Ohio EPA, us, and the contracted consultants. foreclosed and forfeited properties are eligible, the county auditor can act as agent of the state, which basically means that they can act on behalf of the property owner to provide access in most circumstances. All in all, we can't help you if we can't legally access the property. Once we determine if a project is eligible, a phase 1 is highly recommended prior to purchasing any property and is a prerequisite for the voluntary action program. As Shelby previously discussed, a phase 1 examines the historical uses of a property to highlight any areas of potential contamination that may need to be further investigated. And remember, it is necessary to complete a phase 1 prior to a property transfer in order to qualify for the BFPP. Again, you will not need to coordinate or complete this work. Once your TBA application has been submitted and approved, Ohio EPA handles the rest. We have contractors on hand that we oversee to complete the work for you for free. Once a phase 1 is completed, that information is used to develop a sampling plan for the property, and a phase 2 assessment is conducted. This could include the collection of soil, groundwater, sediment, soil gas, and indoor air samples. We generally tailor the scope of the phase 2 to the needs of the property owner so that they can leverage other potential funding. We also do asbestos surveys, even if that's the only thing the property needs. Keep in mind, if a building is to be demolished on the property, the asbestos survey is also a pre-demolition requirement for commercial buildings. Again, Ohio EPA handles this with our contracted inspectors who will complete the asbestos survey for you through our TBA program. Projects must be planned. You'll want to start the planning process as soon as possible. When planning your project, it is essential to create a timeline you can reasonably follow so you can maintain a consistent progress towards your end use goal. Ohio EPA also provides technical assistance to help navigate the brownfield process. We can facilitate collaboration meetings to discuss project details and help sort out funding options. Additionally, we offer workshops and trainings like this webinar today to provide education on the brownfield process and funding. And if you plan to take a property through our voluntary action program, we can provide free technical review of documents, help navigate rules on complex projects, and ensure cleanups are protective of the human health and the environment. We can leverage our program to partner with other agencies like the Department of Development, the Department of Transportation, and US EPA to share costs for larger projects or provide a match for grant projects. Essentially, we are trying to help you get a project from start to finish and help match you with the right funding to get the project completed. The Department of Development has an extraordinary program right now for demolition and brownfield remediation. The Building Demolition and Site Revitalization Program has a total of $150 million available, with $500,000 set aside for each county. The application period opened in October and closes in April. Funds will be provided on a first come, first served basis. And while this program does not apply to typical brownfields, it does apply to buildings with asbestos. The Brownfield Remediation Program has a total of $350 million available, with $1 million set aside for each county. The application period opens today and closes in April. Funds are also provided on a first come, first served basis, and appropriate documentation and due diligence must be provided. For both of these grant programs, with the exception of the funds that are set aside for the county, there is a 25% cost share required. The great thing about the TPA program is that our services can count as part of that match. For those of you that are familiar with the abandoned gas station program that is also run out of the Department of Development, it has been put on hold until further notice. Moving forward, all eligible abandoned gas station assessment and cleanup applications will also be accepted through the remediation program. Again, the application period for that closes in April. Much more detailed information about both the demolition and remediation programs, including webinar links and FAQs, can be found at the Department of Development state website. The Ohio Brownfield Loan Program is run through the Ohio Water Development Authority, or OWDA. If a private entity can manage these funds, they can get a $500,000 loan for assessments and up to $5 million for cleanup. There are many redevelopers and local governments out there that are taking advantage of this program, as the loan terms are generally reasonable with a low interest rate. OWDA has also earmarked loan money for on-site stormwater projects. Reduction of stormwater discharges and its proper management are ongoing concerns for community and businesses. Many communities are considering brownfield properties in their stormwater management planning. Again, this is why planning is important. The stormwater loan is a low interest loan with funding up to $5 million. Jobs Ohio is a private nonprofit corporation that administers many redevelopment incentives for Ohio. They have a variety of grants and loans that are larger than other options to help end users transform a property, including brownfields. Each project is evaluated based on the number of funds invested by the end user and the certainty of its completion. This is a great option if you have an interested redeveloper who will be providing jobs to the community. Next, we will look at federal grants provided through US EPA. These grants create an opportunity for communities to assess larger projects, establish their own brownfield program, or get a cleanup grant for a specific property. These grants are very competitive and have an annual funding cycle with a finite application period. Local governments and nonprofits can apply when solicitations open in the fall. This year, the window was open from late September to mid-November. The grant awardees are announced in late spring, and funds are allocated the following October. There are 4 grant options for brownfields. The US EPA assessment grant offers up to $500,000 for community-wide assessments, or you could join a coalition with a few communities and get up to $1.5 million. Due to increased federal funding, this is the highest these grants have ever been, and there is no cost share required. It is a 4-year grant period, and you do not have to own the properties. US EPA also has cleanup grants. They have upped the amounts on these to $5 million. So they are really encouraging communities to clean up properties. In the US EPA cleanup world, you must own the property. So the local government will have to take the title during its cleanup, but then they can transfer it back to the end user or other entity as part of the process. With the multi-purpose grants, you can combine assessments and cleanup for up to $1 million. Ownership is required for this grant as well, but there is no cost share requirement. Unlike assessment and cleanup grants, multi-purpose grants are only offered every other year. The Revolving Loan Fund, or RLF, is also available every other year, and it rotates with the multi-purpose grant. It was not offered in the most recent fiscal year 24 solicitation, so it will be available next year. However, recipients who are currently have an open agreement still have the opportunity to request additional funding. RLFs are a great option for certain communities with higher capacity and help establish revolving loan programs to work on various brownfield projects within a target area. Another incredible resource funded through the US EPA Cooperative Agreement is the Technical Assistant to Brownfield Communities, also referred to as TAB. TAB is a national program separated into 6 regions. Ohio's TAB provider is K-State University, located in Manhattan, Kansas, and we refer to them as KSU TAB. KSU TAB provides a large array of free services, and their staff has a wealth of institutional knowledge. The list of services that KSU TAB can provide is extensive, and some of the technical assistance available is similar to what the US EPA and Ohio EPA can offer. Some of these services include community outreach, educational workshops, planning and redevelopment, visioning and the review of plans, technical reports, or grant applications. If you're in need of some help with something that you don't see listed, please reach out to KSU TAB and they can guide you to the resources that you need. A helpful service that TAB can provide is the creation of a brownfields inventory. A brownfields inventory is a list of properties that meet the definition of a brownfield based on land use history and include their associated attributes and data, such as ownership information, street address, and lot size. This report can help a community identify potential sites for redevelopment and be a valuable land use planning tool. TAB has created a user-friendly inventory tool that helps community manage their brownfield sites. BIT helps store and manage site data by allowing photos, property data input, and displaying it in a format that is similar to Google Maps. Another excellent tool available is the TAB Easy Grant Writing tool. If you are considering applying for a US EPA Brownfields grant, this is a great place to start. This is a great resource that can be used at any point in the grant writing process, allows potential applicants to review templates and samples of grant applications, as well as the ability to see how other similar communities are navigating the process. Both the TAB Easy and TAB BIT tool are accessible on the KSU TAB website, as the contact information for the site or for the state and regional representatives are listed here. The last program I'm going to talk about today is the Interagency Working Group on Coal and Power Plant Communities and Economic Revitalization. The Interagency Working Group is a newer collaboration effort that consists of 12 member agencies across the federal government to help support coal, oil and gas, and power plant communities transition away from those resources. The working group focuses on getting the best funding options to the community who needs it. They do this by targeting 4 main areas: infrastructure, environmental cleanup, entrepreneurship, and workforce development. With infrastructure, funding helps to provide reliable broadband, good roads, clean water, modern sewer systems, and affordable local transportation. While a lot of cleanup funding comes from the US EPA, other cleanup funding can help support land and industrial transformation, including the development of low carbon technologies, at former power plants, and industrial facility programs to remediate abandoned mines, orphaned wells, and brownfields. Communities also deserve thriving small businesses that drive innovation, including the provision of support for them from the community development financial institutions, nonprofits, and innovation hubs, as well as the support for training programs to align their workforce with actual industrial growth in each key region. An example of one of these agencies is the Economic Development Administration. The EDA has a competitive grant program that focuses on impacted coal communities that can assist with economic diversification, job creation, capital investment, workforce development, and reemployment opportunities. The infrastructure bill has poured significant amounts of funding into areas that can help a community as a whole to transition and recover from energy industries, from environmental cleanup to improving water quality and public transit. I encourage you to learn more and stay informed by visiting the energycommunities.gov and by engaging in the working group social media channels listed here. Now, as we start to wrap up our presentation, I wanted to include a fun trivia question about Ohio. Which of these animals is the official state reptile of Ohio? Eastern Massasauga rattlesnake, Eastern box turtle, black racer snake, Lake Erie water snake.
Okay, I have launched the poll, so when that pops up on your screen, go ahead and make your selection. And I'd also like to remind you, I know some folks logged on a little bit late, but the handouts are also included, a PDF of the PowerPoint, if you go to your handouts option on your screen, and you can download that. Okay, and it looks like most people have made their selection. If you haven't, go ahead and get in there and make your selection. So I'll close the poll here shortly. Okay, I am closing the poll and sharing the results. Back to you, Richard.
Oh, very close. The official state reptile of Ohio is actually C, black racer snake. That was a good guess though with the box turtle though. There you go. There's the image of the black racer. Hopefully you are now more informed about the Voluntary Action Program and the various funding sources in Ohio. We are always available to help you navigate through the environmental regulations and funding options for your brownfield project. You can visit our website to find more program-specific information, as well as see the list of ongoing trainings and workshops that are available. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to our staff at Ohio EPA. Additionally, please scan the QR code to sign up for the Ohio EPA email subscription. Once you create an account, you will have the opportunity to subscribe to a relevant list for you or your community. In addition to the Brownfield interested parties list, which I highly recommend, you can also subscribe to the list from any division, including but not limited to rule updates, trainings, and workshop announcements and funding opportunities. Thank you so much for joining our presentation.
Okay, great. Well, thank you both, Shelby and Richard. And now we're going to answer a few questions submitted during today's presentation. We did get some very specific questions, and those will be followed up via email after the webinar. But we would like to touch on a couple of more general questions that have come in. So the first question is there a limitation to the types of redevelopment that can be done on a brownfield?
I'll go ahead and answer that. This is Roxanne Anderson. The limitation of redevelopment on a brownfield is only based on the cleanup that is done. So when you go through the voluntary action program, that's going to be dependent on what your redevelopment is as to how the level of cleanup that you need to do. So that's really a conversation. We have technical assistance, which we kind of talked about if you want to go through the voluntary action program. And you can interact with people on our team, and they will kind of guide you through that process and tell you what you need to do.
Okay, great. Thanks, Roxanne. Our next question is, who can apply for state TBA funds?
So the state TBA funds have to be a nonprofit, government, quasi-government, or entity. So also including land banks, port authorities. And so a lot of times if we get a project that is not necessarily owned by those entities, they will be able to apply on their behalf. So if there is a redeveloper who really wants to work on a project that the city is interested in or is a part of their strategic plan, the city can apply on their behalf, but it does have to be a government, quasi-government, or nonprofit.
Okay, the next question is VAP the only program for a BFPP to go through to get the state's recognition that the BFPP has obtained their defense to CERCLA?
That question would probably be best answered by Chelsea. Chelsea, are you available? Okay, I don't know if she's on, but we can try and answer that after the fact. Oh, or Emily, are you on?
Yeah, Roxanne, sorry, I wasn't sure if you guys would be able to hear me or not. This is Emily
Perfect.
Johnson. Regarding, can you repeat the question one time? I think I heard the whole thing, but if you could say it one more time for me.
Sure. Is VAP the only program for a BFPP to go through to get the state's recognition that the BFPP has obtained their defense to CERCLA?
So the Voluntary Action Program is the only program that we offer in the state as far as a voluntary type of entry to go through. The kind of opposite spectrum of that or opposite end of that would be our remedial response program and enforcement type order. So yes, to answer your question, that is the only option.
Okay, great. And then we'll just do a couple more questions here and wrap up. The next one, is there a searchable database for brownfields in my area?
So that answer is kind of tricky. We do have a brownfield inventory that is available through the state. However, those brownfields are only the brownfields who have gone through our targeted brownfield assessment program. So there's no comprehensive list of brownfields in your area. There's also a list through the US EPA where you can look at any Superfund sites or brownfields that have gone through any of their assessment or cleanup programs. Essentially, any brownfield that's had grant money is on a database. Otherwise, there are no comprehensive lists.
Okay, and this will be our last question, and then we'll wrap up. What educational opportunities or workshops are available in addition to the grant writing workshop?
We have an array of webinars and workshops throughout the year. We have this year we have the Brownfield Conference coming up in May. It's May 7th. We have a grant funding webinar, which goes over a lot of this funding and a little bit of additional funding that's available for brownfields, which usually happens in the spring. We also have a grant readiness and capacity building webinar, which is also in the spring. And if you're signed up for the Ohio EPA subscription, you will get information on all of those, as well as anything else that might come up throughout the year that we do trainings and webinars on. We are also able to come out to any community or entity, or if you're having meetings, we can kind of provide educational services and training at those as well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Shelby, Richard, Roxanne, and Emily for your presentation and helping to answer all the questions. I know that quite a few more came in, and again, someone will follow up via email with you on your question. Thank you, everybody, for attending the webinar today. The webinar has been recorded, and you'll receive an email after the webinar with a link to the recording, a link to the session survey, and a link to your certificate of attendance. The session survey will also pop up once the webinar ends. We value your feedback, and we would greatly appreciate it if you let us know how we're doing. Let us know if there's anything we can do to further assist you. As a reminder, CEUs are available for the session. To receive credit for REHS or EHSIT certification hours, please respond to the question about CEUs in the session survey. The webinar is also approved for 1 hour of VAP Certified Professional Development Credit Units. To receive credit, submit your webinar attendance certificate with your CP renewal application to Ohio EPA's VAP Certified Professional Program. Before we end for the day, check out our upcoming session on January 24th. Get the green thumbs up. Apply for the Encouraging Environmental Excellence Award Program. Join the Recycling and Sustainability Unit as they cover the who's, what's, and whys of the Encouraging Environmental Excellence Award Program. The webinar will highlight who's eligible to apply, what the award program is, and the benefits of receiving recognition. Plus, the team will walk you through on how to apply. To register for upcoming webinars, you can check out our agency event calendar. The link on the slide, the events calendar link, is also on our front web page for the agency and also on our web page footer at the bottom of each web page. If you miss past webinars, you can go to DEFA's web page at the link on the slide. Once you're on the DEFA web page, click on the word training on the left-hand menu column. Here you'll find a recording of the trainings you may have missed. You can also go to our agency YouTube channel to view recorded webinars. We'll post a recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel. It usually posts around a week within the webinar. We also post a PDF copy of the PowerPoint slides with the recording. And the YouTube channel link can also be found on each web page footer, and the YouTube icon is next to the Twitter icon on the bottom right side. To receive notifications of upcoming webinars, you can go to our Ohio EPA Resource Hub, create an account, go to the option Subscribe to Updates, then select the option All Trainings, Webinars, and Conferences, and you go to the link on the slide for that. And the link is also at the bottom footer of every web page. With that, we'll end today's webinar. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great day.